day and welcome once again to the Chief Auditor Series. Sama presents this series to you, and Deepjee, it was an idea which Deepjee had germinated and I had supported him on that. And we decided that we will make a series called the best of the best in the internal audit sphere, get them to speak to us. We will ask a couple of questions that really come up on this, and this will enable something that we will leave behind for the profession. We have brought to you till now very, very eminent speakers, and yet again, as we introduce Sanjay, you will notice that we are bringing the best from the industry to you. We also have plans to bring in a few accommodations. We have plans to bring some regulators so that this becomes a very 360-degree view of internal audit. So that is why that's how this Chief Audit Series has been conceived. Deepjee.
Yeah, this is excellent. The way we are getting eminent speakers, imparting knowledge, imparting, good practices, best practices, which can be caught on not only by the internal fraternity, but students, even chief audit executives, even auditors across the world, because, internal audit is a universal subject, I would say, where people can learn from each other across the world. So I think this series is really coming great because both Satish and myself, we are learning, after 35 years in the profession, 30 years in the profession, we are learning such a lot as we are speaking and we are hearing the chief audit executive. And maybe, as Satish rightly pointed out, we'll get in academicians, we'll get in regulators, so that we get a 360 view of the internal profession, and the profession really flourishes. People learn and the profession reaches its zenith or reaches its peak slowly, because there's more and more importance to the internal function.
First class. So let me now introduce Sanjay to all of us. Sanjay Mathur is an expert in corporate governance, integrated enterprise risk management, ethics and fraud investigations, internal audit, SOX and IFC compliance, and revenue assurance. He is a specialist in risk management through his degree IRM UK, certified fraud examiner from the USA, certified management accountant from Australia, cost and management accountant of India, where he was ranked 38. He has also completed executive education program from the Stephen M. Ross School of Business of the University of Michigan, USA, and trained the trainer for crucial conversations. Currently, he leads the governance, risk management, and compliance function, which is abbreviated as GRC, at Tata Communications. He has a rich experience of around 28 years in both the manufacturing and service industries, working in Fortune 500 companies such as Monsanto Chemicals and Shell Petroleum, and esteemed Indian conglomerates like Tata Communications, Reliance Communications, and Ranbaxy. In his current role, he has been focusing on enhancing risk management and providing digital solutions based on advanced analytics in the areas of risk management, internal audit, and continuous fraud monitoring. So all yours, Sanjay. We are just dying and waiting to hear from you.
Firstly, thank you very much, Satish, for this wonderful introduction. I'm really humbled to hear from you. And also thank you, Deepjee, for this concept which you have created. It's a fantastic. Let me share honestly that, I have watched most of the video which or the series which you have done so far. Not 100%, but yeah, maybe 90% I watched, and I found myself, very interesting and very insightful videos. So, before I start anything, let me share when Satish reached out to me first, and when he asked me to participate in this, I felt humble. That's number one. But at the same time, I was actually thinking and saying, what I'm going to talk, because all the previous speakers has spoken so much about the audit. And it's so rich that, I need to talk something different. So then I was started thinking, and then finally I came out, the topic which I'm going to talk today is more of the internal audit or CA ecosystem. And I have put some slides which I'll project to you. And I will try to not to focus too much on the topic or the subject which is already spoken, and which is already been debated and discussed on the various different forms. So that's what I want to do. I want to start sharing my screen. Just give me 1 minute. Let me And please let me know if it is visible to all of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely clear.
So the first slide, basically, start with what I'm trying to say, that the views which
you may
is
want to use
expressed today.
it's come up.
Sorry?
No, it was in, you could have, it was not on slideshow. Now it is on slideshow.
Okay, now can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the disclaimer is very important slide, especially for an auditor, is also important to make sure that we follow all the governance structure which is put in place. So the views which I'm going to present today is my personal view, and these views are not to any company where I am presently working or in the past where I worked. This is typically kind of my own experience. I may use some inferences or some kind of example which I have learned during the course of my experience in various companies, but these are my personal views. So, as I was explaining and I was going through what I'm going to discuss today, uh, let's talk about what is the ecosystem for the internal audit, or what's the ecosystem which a CAE hold and how he should work about. I will not go too much deeper on the definition of the internal audit, definition or responsibility of the chief internal auditor, but there are few words which I feel very important, which I picked up today, and I'm going to talk more. So if you go by pure definition of the internal audit, there are various words which appear. The word which I've not picked are not less important, but what I picked is I want to give more deeper. So one is the independent assurance. So the interesting debate always happened that the CAE should report to whom. It should be part of the CFO group, it should be part of the CEO, or it should have a dual reporting or the administrative reporting to management, or it should be to full reporting to the board or audit committee. So this debate is there, and I'm sure all the professionals will be facing this kind of discussion day and night. But to me, the independent is not the reporting. The independent to me is a state of mind. And when I say state of mind, why I'm using this word is because, we have to report to someone. What is more important is that in your executing your day-to-day job or executing our duties, do we have a freedom to operate? And when I say freedom to operate, means freedom to speech. And especially like if you broadly classify the internal audit into three parts, one is the area need to pick up, which is the area need to be reviewed. You have a freedom to go and do all your work which is required. So access to all the available information system, access to all the documentation in the company, and then finally, do we have access to raise our voice to a different level of the management and board? If these three things are in place, it doesn't really make any difference that where you are reporting. It's like basically talking about more of the functional alignment, more of the duties to be independent than the reporting structure to be independent. So what I'm trying to bring to this table today discussion is that see rather than the reporting part. Then second aspect which comes to the objectivity. The word is a very simple word, objectivity, but I tell you, it is very, very important, and it changed my perspective almost 15 years back when I first into audit. And one of my previous where I was working, one of the senior person, the CEO, was debating and asking what is the objective of the internal audit. And I'm talking about 15 years back, and you see the vision of that company CEO was, he's saying that, and generally we say what we have learned and what we experience. The objective of the internal audit is to find the effectiveness and efficiency of the process which is under review. And is that all? Or it also includes that we're going to work with the management to ensure and continuously monitoring the gap which is identified. So if you for a minute, if you think in a split into two parts, the objective is to just identify or measure the effectiveness and efficiency. B is to be part of the entire ecosystem or the management of the company and say, okay, now I identified, I can also continuously monitor a health company to bridge this gap. Now, then the question comes that while I'm doing this, I need to also keep independency, because the independency is my key objective, which is like, now the point is that objectivity with independency. So, and I can, I give some more example when I go along. But what is important is that for us to fix this objectivity in every work, whether it's a planning, whether it's an audit which we are doing, if we keep that objectivity in mind, I think it will help immensely for the internal audit success. And the third part, which has been lately debated, about what is the value addition is bringing by the internal auditor. And if you go further definition, or the way I have defined the internal value addition, is basically there are two parts of value addition: value preserver or value creator. Now, I think we need to focus more on a value preserver than the creator. We may create few values while going along the chain, but mostly it is largely related to value preserver. And value preserver is also, sometimes it is difficult to measure, but it is very important aspect to showcase, or to project and to exhibit to the management, saying that what value can bring by the internal audit. So that's a very basic fundamental which I want to keep as a top of the ecosystem. Then the foundation stone is two part. One is the tone at top company culture, and I'm sure everyone have heard this point. But the question or the point which is in my mind today is that, as an CAE, what I'm contributing to build the robust tone and top. So it's not the CEOs or the CFO or the few board directors roles to bring the tone and top. We equally responsible as an internal auditor and an experienced governance expert to bring the tone at top. We need to bring that culture, or we need to help the company to build this culture and the tone at top. So what are we doing to, after our audit observations or after our review, how we are bringing the gap at the tone at top? That's the most important aspect, because the foundation is top need to be solid. And the second is the culture aspect. Now, there are many thoughts which has gone, and people have talked about auditing the culture of the company, but I'm not going far. I'm just talking about, as an auditor, what we are bringing to build the best culture, and how is the best culture is. So if I give you some example, there are two typical aspects of the culture which talks about visible culture and which is talk about invisible aspects. So if you take about the visible aspect, the behavior and the action of the people, which will come over a period of time. But when you talk about the invisible aspect, which is basically mindset, belief, and the basis, the finding which you are assumptions. Now this can be changed or can be contribute lot by the auditors. When you come out with the data, you can bring out all these facts to build the culture. And you need to also think about, is this culture which you are going to build is a collaborative culture, it's a data-driven culture, or it's like a judgmental culture, or it's a customer-centric culture, or it's an innovative culture. So you name any 4 or 5 aspects of the different culture, and an auditor can certainly bring a lot of value with the facts and the data to build the culture strong. So my point is that the CIE plays a very bigger role in establishing a robust tone and tone and top and the culture. So then come out with the 4 pillars of the ecosystem. The first pillar, which I think is most talked and most discussed in the CAE forum in various different aspects related to internal audit framework, methodology. And I don't want to repeat with what's been already talked by multiple people, but there are few aspects which I want to bring it here, which is like very critical for the success of the audit function itself. And the first part is, creating synergy between various different governance streams. And if you see that, in the past few years, there are various different governance streams has been emerged, whether it's by regulator, whether it's by requirement of the law, or whether it's by company itself. And the difference, and if you go by traditional 4 line of difference, so how the CAE bringing value in the 4 line of defense? That's the first question. And the second question is that how we're creating a synergy between the different governance system. And if I give some example, let's take example of the risk management. Over a period of time in last 4 or 5 years, the risk management is taking the center stage of the entire governance mechanism, whether it's a regulator, whether it's a rating agency, everyone is talking about the risk. And the internal audit is so close that you will see that places the risk management and the internal audit goes in hands on hands. Then it comes to the IFC, which is a subset of the related to financial control review. And if you go further down, the role which the CAE plays on the investigation part. So there are multiple aspects which is done in every company all together to reduce the audit fatigue, to increase the efficiency, and also talk about the cost benefit. So that's the underlying principle. And the first point which I was talking about, the 4 line of defense. Now, the CAE can play a big role in even all the 4 lines. So let's take example line 1, the process streamline, the rich experience and the end-to-end knowledge which an audit function can provide will not have to any individual process or individual process owner or function. So while any process has been designed or any gap is identified, going back to the process owner and sharing your experience of end-to-end and keeping the overall objective in the mind, I think the line 1 will be, and the more stronger the line 1, there will be less chances to get the slippage or the issues of the ineffectiveness or efficiency. So the ultimate objective is to build the good governance system. Then we don't have to wait for the every year finding an audit. It's basically go back to the root cause, work with the process owner to build the line 1 defensive so strong that it don't reach out to line 2 and 3. And line 2 is typically a very thin gap between line 2 and 3, which is like risk management and IA can play a very critical role. And I'm sure everyone is doing that because the audit has also moved from traditional based to risk-based audit. So that's also a very interesting part how we do. And line 3 defense is anyway the which we are governing, but line 4 is also important. We go and communicate results to the board or to audit committee or to the management, which are all those bodies are responsible for managing the governance across the company. So the role which we can play across all the 4 line of defense, plus what we can play into different streams is very important. The more synergy and the more corroborated view will come on the risk part. And interesting story which I want to share at this point of time. A few years back, in one of my company when I was working, and when we identified an issue in the internal audit, the internal audit report says that this is absolutely no issues. And the question asked is that was this issue identified in the risk management, and how it is been complying into the IFC or the SOX. So the IFC came into later stage into India, but the SOX was the part. And no one has the overall view. So putting all together and simply to create that, a consolidated view for the senior management or board, it was a task because they need to see how the risk has been actually behaving into the real life. Or if you go back and say, this is the risk I've identified, the question is that in the real life, how the risk has emerged. And when the risk has emerged, how the entire system, which was supposed to mitigate, has behaved. So, putting all this together to give a complete overview, because the board, in my view or my experience, they're looking more from a complete end-to-end overview rather than one portion of it. So I think that makes more, more critical. And when we're talking about this subject, what is our actually doing this audit? Are you doing all in-house model or co-sourcing model or outsourcing model? How we are leveraging the best available talent across the industry? That's more important. I think that nowhere it is simply in one, but the most important is how we are using the most available talent and the resource pools which is there. There's a one very another interesting part which I've seen, that people, when we talk about sophisticated standards or sophisticated analytical becoming, we are actually moving away from the review of the source document. I don't know how much of we are actually focusing and trying to go back to the basic and say that, do we have a source document which reflects what is there? Because the way the data analysis reflect, we just start giving our opinion without going into the source document. So I emphasize that we may change the technology, may change and give us the too many solutions, but all these solutions are very important to increase my efficiency. But what is more important, that I need to also focus to review the key underlying document. And when I do review any projects with my which generally comes and say, how many of you have actually gone and seen the basic AV or basic underlying document which is there? And you will find that many times we find a difference of view than what originally prepared. So I think that's so on the framework, not spending the time. I think the framework, the importance is to create the synergy, to put across the different streams together, and also look back on the source is the key part, which I feel is important for building a robust ecosystem. It's the stakeholders' expectations. Now, this is very interesting aspects, because we come back a rule book and say that as per the regulations, or as per the Companies Act, or as per the SEBI listing requirement, or as per the SEC requirement, the internal audit function need to work like this way and just start delivering. But is that the most effective way, where the organization objective is to create a robust processes, or it's like I'm achieving my own objective of building a robust governance system? So it's important to understand the expectations from both the stakeholders, internal and external. External external stakeholders often say that we are eyes and ears of them to raise the concerns. But if you historically see the reported cases in the company in the last, say, even few years, 4 or 5 years in India, let's not go and see the global part, but even if you see the narrow mind in India, you will find that there are many cases which could have been identified by the auditor. But then we somehow, the CAE or the audit team has had inability to bring that point in that perspective. So are we actually, coming to the expectations which the external stakeholders done? How much engagements we are doing with the external stakeholders to understand their expectations, and how we are bridging that gap? So that's on the external part. And the internal, which is like more closely where we have to work and do it. And one of the key concerns, where in last all 28 years, every company wherever I worked, I found this issue which coming saying there are too many audits. There are fatigue of the audit. So how do we create this, fatigue? How do we create and change the word which says it's not fatigue, you are welcome. You come and audit this and tell us that what are the issues which you are facing, how do we want to fix this? So I think that's the most important aspect which, as a leader, we need to work on and find out what is coming. The second key pain point which I found is like, your recommendations are excellent, but it's not practical. Or if it is practical to implement, it's going to impact my business, or it's going to increase efficiency, or it's going to be a very cost, it will not be cost effective. So what is the practical recommendation, and then what is the residual risk? So we will face, and I'm sure everybody is facing this scenario, that some of the recommendation may not be practical, we also know by heart, but the gap has to come out and the management has to take the risk. So it goes back to the risk theory and say that our risk is the 4T theory, and say that if the risk is not been taken, terminated, if the management has taken, then how do we project this to and say this is the risk which is taken by the management? And how do we go back and apply the risk management theory in our internal audit risk appetite? So that's the other part. And the other most important aspect which I found is the business understanding. So, we keep saying that we are not fault, we are not finding, we are just doing review of it, efficiency and effectiveness. But, touch our heart. What we are doing is that there is an expert running certain process. He has his bread and butter. He has learned both academically and by experience, and he's running his process and reviewing for the shorter period, trying to find out certain gap and giving it. So that means what I need to, or the CAE need to, or the audit team need to be one step ahead of them to not only understand the business, but also understand the risk kind of mindset, which will bring out the aspect which they are missing on day to day. So I think that's play a very, very important role for understanding of the business and going on. Or sometimes we prototype and say that we are the financial auditor. We are not financial auditor. CA is part of the responsibility is the finance, but he has to review the overall across the value chain of the company. So what is then it requires a different knowledge to do it. And the third part, which is quite often the last part on this, is quite often asked is that can you benchmark this process with a different industry? So, because it's always important for any process to know the process maturity. So, do we equip to give this kind of? If we don't, can we, find a resource where it is available and connect and do it? So, I think this is managing the, in my view, is most critical aspect for a success of any internal auditor. And that's the second part which I want to put the focus. The third part, which is the audit skill, and this is always a green subject which can be debated and discussed any point of time, that what expectations we need from a skill, whether it's like in-house resource or outside resource. Whether it goes outsourced, the problem remains same. It's just like moving from the company's head to it goes to the third party service provider, but the problem remains same. The field is relatively new, the audit field. A lot of efforts has been done in last few years, several years, I think, say 5-10 years, and I'm Deepjee and Satish, you are part of that efforts to bring this professional. So you see that a lot of people are coming to take this area. But now, how do we continuously enhance their skill? How do we, give risk insight, audit techniques? There are a lot many resources available on teaching the audit techniques and the relevant business understanding by expert come. But there are very less, training goes on developing the softer part of the skill, which is like a collaborations and communication. So you may find the best observation, but are you putting the right way? And ultimate objective is not finding observation. The ultimate objective is that it goes back to the business and it works there, and you see that the changes are coming in, and then coming into different concepts available. And I'll talk more on the communication in next of one slide. But before that, there are different approach which different companies has followed. And one is the guest auditor, and which is like basically a shorter period of time you get people. And I've seen a very large organizations, which is multiple geography they operate, and they have such an effective guest auditor who is moving from one location to another. And the guest auditor is not auditor by profession. He is a subject matter expert. He is doing his work somewhere. He is coming into this audit field to different geography or different conduct audit. So he brings a very rich experience of the subject matter. But what he doesn't know is the auditing skills. So the overplay role the CAE or the audit has to play is to bring him the governance structure, or bring him that what is the way we need to bring these issues and sort it out. So I think the guest auditor concept is a very, very important part. The second part, which is coming on the rotational auditor, and this is often discussed more of a statutory auditor perspective, but if it is also important from an internal audit perspective, that I give some example of without quoting the name of the company where I have worked, and the requirement, if somebody has to reach certain X level and above, he need to have a minimum to. So the expectations is not at an entry level. what they're expecting, that person is moving from a different band, say like from a middle management band, then he need to have a minimum experience of so many years in the audit field. And that brought down a interesting facts. One is that the person is understanding the overall gambit of the management. He also understand how the overall management or how the overall information flow works. And he's also very friendly to the auditor, because you need to audit him after a few years. He will go back to his function, and he will be very friendly to auditors also, to understand our view that why we are bringing this issue, so that less efforts is put on the collaboration and selling our objective or selling our issues. So the rotational auditors has, I've seen, worked very well in the large organization, especially if it is geographically spread, it has worked very well. And the third part, which is the last part, is a career auditor. And I'm sure a lot of things has been built to develop the skill of the career auditor. And the IIA is playing a role in bringing these skills into the young blood also. It's not about the experienced person. And the last one is the subject matter. So I touch on the guest auditor, but the subject matter is like, just talk example in what I've seen is that when you come to audit, a general tendency is that we know everything. You tell us the subject, I'll come and audit and I know everything. But that's not the reality. We also have to learn. I may be qualified, but I have not practiced that. Even if I practice, I don't have the relevant touch to that subject. So I need to be very open and asking for a good subject matter expert who understand the nuisance of that particular area. So it goes back, all these three aspects which I talked as go back to my objectivity. If you change the little bit on the objectivity and say my objectivity is not to find the efficiency or effectiveness only, the objectivity is to go back and set the process well, and one of defense so strong that the issues occurrence reduce, then all those things start put into place. So that subject matter expert plays a big role, and we should not be shying asking this all questions to respective subject matter, whether it's an inside or outside. So that's on the skill part. I'll take just one more fourth pillar, and then I move on the communication slide later on. So the fourth pillar, which is very important about the continuous improvement. Now, this has the two aspects. One is the continuous improvement of the audit framework methodology, or the way we work, um, and both external and internal benchmarking. But the most important aspect is that the audit feedback. And the feedback is also related to, if you have an external agency or in that feedback, and then also turning of that feedback, incorporating into the next audit cycle is the key. I've seen that many times we take the feedback, we keep and forget the next step plan is being built. How do we take this feedback and start putting into the practice? Unless you see that, and when you go back to the auditor, you will again face the challenges. So if you go to the same auditee, he will again give the same challenge. So I think it's the most important aspect is that what we expect a process owner to do on a day-to-day basis, we also follow the same to upgrade our internal audit process itself. So that's the most important aspect. If I audit the internal audit function, would I have 10 queries, or I'll say that it's been managed well? So from that angle and try to put the perspective. And yes, the constant value addition, and it's again my personal view. My experience is most of the internal auditors are chartered accountant or cost accountant or MBA. Very few are engineers, but you will hardly find any salesperson anywhere the CAE come. The salesperson are more vocal, but their profession lack this skill. So I think it is very important for us to build that skill and try to sell what you have already achieved or what you already identified. We may be adding excellent or a very I'll say a very good observation which leads to an excellent value addition to the company by process design or by absolute financial number, but we don't go and project that way. So I think it's also important to learn and say that, okay, how I'm going to constantly, advocacy the internal audit outcome, not the professions. I'm talking about more of an outcome of the internal audit coming out. So these are the 4 pillars, which I think is a very important aspect for the ecosystem of the internal audit and CA. I'll move to the next, what's a soft skill which is in my views for building a good internal audit function. And if you talk about the communications, the interview, it is also important to understand that hierarchically, every company, the internal auditor will be placed 1 or 2 levels down to the. When I say this, what I'm trying to clarify that a junior most person in the internal audit team may be interacting with the middle level or the senior level of the process owner, because that's how the process or the hierarchy defined in the company. So that means we need to, continuously put a lot of effort on the ground level people to understand and learn faster. If they have learned this faster, they will grow faster than any other person in the organization because his skill has been enhanced in a way. So the interview skill, conflict management, negotiation and persuasion. So I give an example, few years back, there was training across the company was going about this crucial conversation. And when this topic comes to me, I volunteer myself to learn this and then translate to the whole, so learn the train the trainer kind of thing. And what interestingly, which I found is that this is more for closer or more profession itself. For all of us to, how do we go and put across our point of view when the expectations are is very high, the stake is very high, and the opinion differs. Especially you find that the opinion differs. When the opinion differs, how do we sell our point? And how do we resolve the conflict? The crucial conversation is one aspect, but there are many other techniques which is available, which goes back and help us. And I'll take you one more point on the communication. This slide is available, and the message which I want to give here is that there are various different way of communication, and in a shorter period of time, whenever you do any project, you can't change or expect auditee's behavior change. He will be either of these box which we have, whether he will be assertive, he will aggressive, he will passive aggressive or passive itself. What is more important is to understand where his behavior and then try to resolve to get the solution of the problem. See, one fundamental, my belief, which is there, is that everybody, whoever work in the company, they have a good intent, unless it is proven. They are not breaking the process because they want to break. They have, way they oversight it. Now, the way we need to go and project them, bring every conversation back to the green arrow, which is like remain an assertive across all my communication is the success. Found many auditors are very aggressive. They are fundamentally very strong. They are very good analytical skill. They identify all the issues very, very well and very well evident. But the problem is they fail to pass to the auditee. The auditee do not realize the importance of this, and then ultimate objective of implementing the control is failed. So I think that aggression sometimes doesn't work. Sometimes I found auditors are, it is also easy to surrender, and they do which typically upward delegation. They don't do resolve by their own. They just put under the carpet or put into the next level. So then it becomes like a very passive person, but he's also good in analytics. So I think as in CAE, we need to split this part, analytical and the softer part. And since most of the audit team across everywhere are the young generation, so they are very good in their skill, but they may not be good in the communication. So the role which need to bring CAE is very important in communicating. So that's on the communication part. Last on the collaboration, that's very interesting part. 10, 15 years when I was working in the audit and the SOX and very company, one of the question is asked that, is this audit group is part of the game or are they sitting outside the game? So when I say this means, are we actually sitting outside and saying that you are not doing this, you are not doing this, you have to do this way, or we are part of that game? We come and recognize, understand, and we start working on this. So again, it comes back to the objectivity. The minute you decide and say that I am part of the game, I'm not different than the company or the board. I have a different responsibility to play, which requires me to do a different angle. Unless I develop the mutual respect, unless I have a shared vision, I will not be able to. The other interesting part is that we always show our faces to auditee when we do audit or when we go closer. And then whole year we don't even connect with them. So how do we actually go and do a brainstorming with the key vulnerable areas of the process and talk and get their ideas and see how can we put into place? So I think this softer skill, which is very important as how we can include this at a educational skill level, but at least when a person comes to the organization, these aspects plays a big role for developing him and bringing this profession up. So I think this is the key part or heart of the CA's role which he has to play. The last slide, and I'm considering the time which I have to talk, so I'll not spend much time on this slide. But this is a very, very important slide. I try to bring out all the dilemma which we face every day. And I'm not trying to say either left side is right or right side is the right. What I'm trying to say that we need to learn this art of balancing between two, and then decide that for each place, which side I have to decide and how I need to now. And I will touch only the last part more detailed, but otherwise this is very clear that as a hierarchical level in the company or the structure of the audit function which is there, we don't have too much of the authority. Or even authority which is given there, if you're going to use this authority, it's not going to give you the best of the result. So the most part is that the how do an internal audit become more influencer part than authority. If I start influencing people, if I start influencing means if people start thinking about the governance before they take any action, that's the clear-cut influence. That goes back to the culture which I was talking and saying invisible impact, because that will give an impact to their next decision making. If they understand the governance and they say, okay, what happened in the past, but in the future course of action, whenever they think about it and say, oh, this may not be right from a governance point of view. Should I do this or not? So that's the first small level of the influence. But what basically I'm saying that in the last line, the right side is the more appropriate than the left-hand side. So I think we all need to, more critically evaluate ourselves and say, am I an influencer leader who can actually, influence all level of the management? It's not like the bottom. Even if the CA talks to the board, and if I have a limited time, am I able to pass my message to them and explain them what is the key pain area which they need to be bothered about? Or the senior management are patiently listening and acting on that. So I think that influencer part is more important. Each top point which are discussed today, we can talk for hours. But what I'm trying to bring out these thoughts today, and sometime later on we can, some other day, if the time permit, or if you're okay, we can pick a few area and go deeper more. But I want to, complete my own thoughts here with an open-ended question and saying that, these are the always challenge we have and we need to take an appropriate action. So with this, I will take a pause. Any comment or any question?
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Thanks a lot. It is quite a handful. And this slide, basically, you can take each trend and, discuss for hours together, or maybe write a whole book with so many risk incidents or so many incidents that all of us have seen over the last 30 years. But I know, since we are short of time, we'll have two questions to you. So I'll take one question and, Satish can take one question and then we can conclude the session. So,
can you stop the presentation, please?
Yeah, just give me 1 minute.
Yeah.
Stop sharing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
That's
Perfect.
So I think there's one, I'm just picking up one question out of that, one strand, because there's so many things happening. I'll conclude it. When we talked about value addition, the terminology you used was value preserver and value creator. Now, if you look at value preserver, it would be more of assurance or ensuring that everything is in place. And if you talk about value creator, maybe it is talking about, a cost optimization or doing something more which will bring, So can you just explain that a little? Value preserver, value creator. So how do you see that? Your views on that?
No, thank you very much. It's an excellent question. So, this is like day to day, we always keep struggling. So first talk about how the CAE can play a role in value creator. And the Smith, a few years back, if you asked me this, I was more on the left-hand side, you say we are more of a value preserver. But how can we create value? That's an interesting aspect, which I'm also learning in last few years. And if you see the way I was explaining the role which we can play in, creating a stronger line one of defense, right? Or creating, so let's take example of cost optimizations, the point which you have touched, which is like heart of every company. In the audit, we can actually find out where are the areas where for the cost optimization. So that trigger point or the start point is auditor can identify. But rest is his independency, which comes, he can't go and actually start setting up. But at least in such a, whether it's a large or medium or a small company, at least to identify that area, which is the first step, is very, very difficult. The auditors having an end-to-end knowledge can certainly identify area and say, this is the area where the most cost effectiveness can come. And the reason is because they have also internal knowledge, plus they can also benchmark that process with the other industries or other available data. So this is how you can create value and then go out. The preservation part comes is like, various, and I'm taking very small example, where a company has a various policies. And one of the key discussion which goes is about, fraud prevention policy. Every company has a fraud prevention policy. The effectiveness and efficiency of the policy is reviewed by the internal auditor and also reviewed by the instance which is reported, and the go back and see how the fraud investigation done. The most important part is every process where you are identifying a gap and you are identifying a process issue, which later on fixed by the company, is actually preserving of any leakage in the future. So you may not try to, may not be able to bring the or associate a number, financial number, whether it's an opportunity or whether it's a direct loss which we have preserved. But yes, there will be certainly process improvement will bring out of this. In some cases, it may be a small, but in some cases it may be big. So I think that need to be put into place. And both the places, the creative is like it's coming slowly, it is developing depending on the maturity of the process, but for preserving is a straightforward thing. I hope I'm able to answer your question.
Absolutely. Satish.
So symptomatic of your company name, Tata Communication, your communication has been so direct and so perfect, and I can definitely, resound with that. And I was expecting it, Sanjay, to be frank. So I just have one question. You called out so many things in that wonderful first slide that you had. One of the aspects you talked about is business understanding. And I think all auditors have one view on how the business, how do we have to. So how do you and your team, and how do you inculcate this in the team? How do you get a grip of understanding the business?
Yeah, that's very, very, very deep question which you ask. And of course, it's very important, but it's very deep question. It's not possible to gain the business understanding in a shorter period of time.
Correct.
But if you split into 3 or 4 different parts, one is that business acumen, which is like I understand what and how business has been done. Second is like I have a business skill to that particular area. Third, which goes to business knowledge. And the fourth is I'm part in any of those. But what is more important is that, functional training. I don't know how much of us are actually encouraging team to go and attend the functional training which has been done. And I'm not talking about an induction training. I'm talking about if any new, let's take example, if any company introducing any new product, do an internal auditor has an insight to understand what's the product? Do we know that which business we are and how the business has been, going to the consumer, or if it is B2B, how it's going to sell finally. So do we understand at least at the basic knowledge of the business? That's the first step. And the second is that depending on the need, wherever we are working, how do we go and take example? I give more relevant example. GST was a new phenomenon which was brought down a few years back. Everyone was struggling. Even business was struggling to. As an auditor, we need to first understand what is the cost, what is required. And there was no in-house training available. So we went outside to understand that what is the nuisance of the GST, how it's going to impact each industry, how it's going to impact each company, and then start framing the risk and control and say, okay, these are the key risk and this should be controlled, and then the step is to audit it. So the audit comes at the last step. And I think what I generally tell my team is to not jump to the audit. First jump to understand the business, try to map the business process flow or workflow, and find out what are the risk and control, and then pick up the key risk, and within that key risk, go and review the key control. So that's the aspect which I think important. And the only one thing is that we are shying in asking. So as an internal audit, if I don't know something, I should be first to say I don't understand. Please explain me. Nobody is going to hang us.
Yes.
But we assume that we know everything which we don't know. So I think that softer part is also very important when you interact with process owner.
And Sanjay, you very beautifully had also said that, are you part of the game or are you just sitting outside? I think that has been one single learning for me in this thing, besides so many other learnings, but this has really going to, remain etched in my memory. Yeah, Deepjee.
No, I think Sanjay, wonderful. It was such an insightful presentation because, so rich that you could take each sentence and you could build a book, as we rightly said. So it's very difficult for me to conclude, but I'm just going to take out few very simple facts for the internal audit community. What you said across. So I'm just going to talk about 2 or 3 key things which you talked about, and then give 1 or 2 instances of my own which came to my, I have a number of instances happening in the last 30 years which I've seen. So I'll just talk about that. One is, you talked about very clearly working with management to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. Close the gap. The second is value addition, value preserver and value creator. The concept of value preserver and value creator, very important to the auditor. The third is tone at the top and culture, company culture, visible culture, invisible culture. So you specially talked about, how do you influence the invisible culture? How do you change the culture of the organization per se through data, through objective data? Not forcing yourself or not, using the soft communication, using the data points which are there, being objective and changing the culture of the organization. Then you talked about working with the company, working with the officials, brainstorming with process owners, very important. So how do you take an opportunity to brainstorm with process owners, because you only meet them once a year or maybe once in 2 years. So how do you actually ensure that you are in touch with them? The most important thing, the most important thing which you said, which Satish picked out very quickly, was, I don't know. So please ask, go out and ask what you don't know, try to educate yourself so that you can perform better, you can deliver better. So I think this is coming out from your presentation, rich with experience. Really thankful to you. One instance I'll share you. Almost 25 years back, I was an outsourced internal auditor for a very large Indian company with 110 locations, looking after the Western sector, all the states for number of products and divisions. And the chief internal auditor there, he wanted, like you, he was, right up there and wanting to talk about being with the process owners. So they had always had an annual day where every company or every in their group used to make a presentation or used to put up an exhibit. And he was the first chief internal auditor in that group who volunteered to put up an exhibit. So he went to his management to say that I want to put up an exhibit on internal audit. So his management was really shocked. His board was shocked because no chief internal auditor had told them that he wants to exhibit internal audit. And he put up a beautiful, exhibit about that. Please come to us. We are, value preservers, like you said, value creators, value addition. We want to educate you. And that is, he got full marks for that. So, just one instance, I'm telling you, to take an opportunity to go out and work with business and to present yourself and to ensure that you work with the business to close or bridge the gap. So thank you very much, Sanjay. Thanks a lot for this insightful presentation. Satish, you would like to have the last word? You're on mute. Satish, you're on mute.
Yeah. One thing that has really come out is, opportunities will not just come and, you have to grab the opportunity when it comes. And it's absolutely fair to say that, I don't know. And how do I concentrate on value preservation and, if possible, value creation? Wonderful presentation, Sanjay. I kind of expected this level of communication from you. It's ultimately Tata Communication, Tata Sanjay Communication, I call it. But wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you very much. And I hope I did the justice to your expectations.
More than justice.
Function, sir.
More than justice. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Sanjay.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.